gain confidence in being able to access support and say, and know that it's okay to say, I need some help.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Harmonia Podcast. We are joined here today by the lovely Tara, who is a lead mental health social worker within the CAMHS team. Hi, Tara.
Hi everyone, how are you doing?
Tara, thank you so much for joining us here today. Would you like to give a little bit of an introduction?
Yeah, sure. So, as Berta kindly informed you all, my name is Tara. It's Tara McCue-Oliphant. I am a lead mental health social worker within a CAMHS crisis team. So, we work with children and young people from the age of 0 to 18. So, I have been qualified as a social worker now for 6 years, and I have had a wide breadth of experience amongst adults and children's services, some within adult social services and within mental health teams. I say my specialism is within mental health, and I have a really keen focus around kind of psychosis and safeguarding.
Amazing. And I think you also forgot to mention substance misuse background because that's actually where we met in the field of substance misuse because it ties into this.
Definitely, and naturally, there's a lot of crossover as well in the field. So
Exactly. So Tara is joining us today to talk about safeguarding around medication. As most people are aware, cannabis-based medical products do have an impact on you. Not every single strain, but there are some that are higher in THC that can have a sedating effect. And as a result, we just want to talk about the importance of safeguarding your medication around children, around vulnerable adults, and how you can do that. So I'm going to hand over to Tara, who's just going to go over, I suppose, a few different areas of importance. Tara, floors is all yours.
yeah, so thank you so much, Berta. So when we're thinking about safeguarding, where we're looking at medications, we really do need to ensure that there's collaborative approaches. So we really are needing to be informed by the professionals in the health services that are prescribing these medications and ensuring that there is an approach that is looking at the wider safeguarding concerns or potential concerns or risks when this medication is being prescribed. As you said yourself, there is some side effects of some medications which may impact the individuals that are taking these medications. So, for example, if there is a side effect of sedation, that would be concerning for us as a social worker to be thinking about the family. So, we're thinking about young people, the day to day jobs of a parent, what they might have to do, how that medication may impact or potentially reduce their ability to do that, and what we can do to support them. So, sorry, one of the most important things that we'd be thinking about is naturally would be about the storage of that medication. Um, there's lots of different things to consider. Young people are very impressionable. Young people are very curious.
Somebody's having a good time over here. Sorry, I live near a main road. This happens so often. It's so annoying. Go on.
No worries, that's fine. Um, so young people are quite impressionable. They're quite curious, and whether it be intentional or not intentional, young people may see their parents taking this medication and want to know what it is. They might, be curious to have a go to pop one or do whatever it is that they feel that, or they might observe the other parent doing. So in that case, we'd really want to ensure that the medication is stored safely. I mentioned previously around whether it would be intentional or not intentional. The reason why I mentioned that is because working in services such as mental health, we see a lot of young people who access parents' medication to self harm or potentially attempt to take their life. So, because of that, it's really important that that medication is stored safely and that the parents are reviewed and constantly reminded. So, in these situations, we would expect that there is a constant revisiting of the need to store the medication safely. There would need a social worker should actually be also observing that if they're going into the home, if there is a social services involvement. If there's not, then we would expect health professionals to potentially be doing the same thing. As you know, safeguarding is everybody's duty. We all have that concern and need to be observing the risks and doing our best to mitigate those. So that is a big thing for us. Going back to looking at how these medications could impact the parent, we'd want to look at what sort of support they have around them. And once again, we would be taking the lead of the health professionals in terms of their reviews and their professional opinion on how the medication may be impacting them. Because as you know, it's not, everyone will be impacted differently. Every case is unique and we need to look at it uniquely. So we would want to review that and see what support they might have around them for the times they're taking a medication. Should they have very young children, let's say, and the children need to be taken to school? Is the school within walking distance? If not, is there a requirement for, usually the parent would be driving? If that's the case, we know that if they are on a medication that has a sedating effect, that might cause a problem. We might need to be looking at putting in some additional support or pulling on the support networks of the people around them. That could be family, that could be neighbours, friends, schools, etc. So those are two things that we'd really be thinking about in these situations. And as well as that, it's also important to think about the adult that is actually taking the medication. What are their needs? What might be going on for that person? In some cases, whether it be for, let's say, a physical health concern, they may have less capacity to do certain things. They may rely on support from other people. So then it kind of makes you start to think about, I guess, some of those wider implications in terms of, you know, how safe is the support they're receiving. And what I mean by that is some people are getting support from partners, family members to administer medication, to store medication, to support them with their day-to-days. And actually, we have instances where some of those partners may have substance misuse issues and have actually, you know, taken that medication for themselves. We have had situations where kind of, which not as, we don't see this as often, but it does happen where it is the medication has been used as a form of punishment, in the sense where it's not being given or administered when it should, because there might be some domestic violence or some abuse going on within the relationships. We have situations where agencies are involved, and there might be an agency that delivers personal care, and actually part of that personal care package is medication supply. They're supporting them with the medication, and they're not coming at the times they should be coming. They're not actually sometimes coming at all. Then we're having to kind of open up inquiries to actually find out what's going on, because that now puts our vulnerable adult at risk as well. So we'd be looking at following the kind of safeguarding procedures under the Care Act when it comes to a vulnerable adult. With children, we're looking more around the Children's Act to establish what support we might be needing to put in place, or be, I guess, paying more attention to. So those are things that are really coming to my mind when I'm thinking about medication.
Do you know what? You touched on so many areas. Right, right. Let's start dissecting. Um, No, 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 this is perfect. That's exactly what we're here for because, one of the things is, at the end of the day, this is a medication. And yes, for some people during the daytime, I like to take something that has more of a CBD because CBD will level out the sort of like sedating effect of the THC. So it's something more balanced. And a lot of the times, if you have working professionals, they would always advise you to get something more balanced during the day. It doesn't necessarily help in the same way. It doesn't give me as much relief as my evening medications, which are a little bit stronger, but it gives me enough so that I can still have a mind and be able to get on with my day. But one of the things that you mentioned that was actually really important is vulnerable adults and how sometimes medications can be withheld. And if they're experiencing domestic violence within the relationship. And you know what? This is actually something that I have come across myself whilst working in the cannabis sector, medical cannabis sector. And it's actually quite heartbreaking. And I think it's something that we really do need to draw awareness to. We have a lot of vulnerable people that we are prescribing. We do prescribe for palliative care patients who often their medication is administered by a relative, a loved one. We also have cases where we've had carers not giving the medication to the patient because they disagreed with that type of medication. And so the patient wasn't necessarily getting that medication that they relied on. So this is a crucial area that really does need to be highlighted. So thank you so much for actually mentioning that. And I think you mentioned something really important around safe storage. Say one of the things that I would say as well when it comes to safe storage, I mean, I don't even have children in the home, but I still have a safe storage box. Not anybody can get a safe storage box, guys. It looks just like a medicine cabinet where it has a lock and key on it. And we always advise that you store it out of reach for children. So something, I guess, more like high up, basically, that you can still reach. Because some of us are disabled, so let's not put it too high. But one of the things I also want to highlight though is that I know for myself, sometimes, especially when I'm in pain, I mean, first of all, I like to complain about the fact that the medication used to come grinded. It no longer comes grinded. So now, if I have an arthritis flare, I have to sit there with my hands trying to grind it. And what does tend to happen without me even noticing is some of it does fall off because, I'm not as steady because I'm in pain. And I won't notice until the next day that some of it has fallen onto my floor. Now, this is something that is so important because a lot of the times people, you won't notice these things. Now I'm more vigilant, but during that time, but when you're in pain, you're not really that vigilant either. Like, so my fear is, I mean, we both work in children and family sector, and I have had so many parents having to come and do parenting assessments with us because of the fact that they have dropped drugs in the house and the baby has come along, baby's crawling along, and they grab it and they put it in their mouths and they overdose. Now, obviously, cannabis responds much differently to other drugs like opiates or, cocaine or something, but it still does have a damaging effect on children. I have seen, like, let's say toddlers, like 8, 9 month old toddlers, eat cannabis that they found on the floor and, have a severe adverse reaction and be hospitalized for days on end as a result. And I'm sure, Tara, you can definitely attest to that.
Yep, absolutely. We have definitely had situations where young people or toddlers have managed to access medication that was left around or unintentionally, like you said, unintentionally left around. And that's why it is so important that we recognize and have these conversations collaboratively to ascertain what risks might be there and do our best to put in preventative plans. And we see in terms of social services, there has been quite a few referrals of that nature that I've come across where a young person has managed to access medication that has been left by the parent. And, in some circumstances, it has resulted in Section 47 inquiries being initiated, especially if there has been other concerns. And it's that can be quite.
So sorry, Tara. Just can you explain Section 47 for people that might not be aware of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Section 47 inquiry is a procedure that is initiated under the Children's Act. It is an inquiry, it's one of our safeguarding procedures that we use. It's used where we believe that a child is at risk of significant harm or likely to be at risk of significant harm. And in that, would usually call for the first point would usually be like a strategy meeting where all professionals involved in the family and the young person who we are actually concerned about will come together and discuss what the risks and concerns are before potentially looking at proceedings such as a child and needs plan or child protection plan. So that is what that is, and because that concern being quite a big one, it has in the past I've seen it go to a Section 47 inquiry, which naturally is quite traumatizing for the family to have to go through. You know, for a lot of them, it's a big thing. So it's really important that we are having these conversations and placing that emphasis on mitigating the risk to prevent these things happening.
Yeah, thank you, Tara. Sorry for cutting you off there. I think a lot of the audience wouldn't necessarily know what is a Section 47 and stuff like that. So thank you for explaining that. One of the things that you also mentioned, well, I can't remember exactly what you said, but it made me think about you know, a lot within the substance misuse sector. The most underrepresentative category would be mothers. And the reason being is because mothers generally feel like they will be judged so much more harsher than their male counterparts, because they're supposed to be the mom, they're supposed to be the ones that care for the children. And so often, mothers would not come forward and sort of admit to their use. And also, there's that fear of losing their child. Now, I do want to tie it into sort of like medical cannabis sector because, as we're aware, a lot of people do misuse to self-medicate. A lot of these people being mothers as well. How do we encourage? I suppose parents just in general, because we can't pretend that fathers don't misuse and they don't go through the same experiences. But parents in general who, let's say, are currently misusing. When I say misusing, I'm talking about recreational use, so illicit cannabis, and would like to reach out for support, but are just so scared of what might happen to them if they do reach out for support. So, what advice would you give them?
It's a really good question, and as you've already pointed out, it is something we see a lot. It's where people they may have identified within themselves or maybe within family settings that there is a support need, and they struggle, and there's loads of reasons why they struggle to reach out. But the fear is a big one, and as we know, especially around services, whether it be from substance use to social services, there is this kind of stigma against getting that support, and um, there naturally there's a bad name attached to it as well. And, especially from a social services, we go in and we grab kids. That's their saying all the time.
Of course, yeah, that's what we love doing. It's the pride, yeah, it's the cherry on top of my week.
Very right on top. And just to probably a good time to say that is not what we are trying to do. Our aim is to keep families together, and our aim is to support, to just help the parent and help the young person and or the family, whoever that may be, to gain confidence in being able to access support and say and know that it's okay to say I need some help. And my advice to them is to be brave. And I know that's really kind of, I guess it feels almost unrealistic in the grand scheme of things, but it's being brave to admit to yourself that, that you need this support. And at this moment, you don't know what to do. and there is other places that will be able to kind of support you and help you, and recognizing that, the hardest thing I think for anyone, especially parents, especially mothers, with the duty that is placed on us as parents, and the societal expectation to be seen as these super women who, we've always got everything um, down. It's all easy. All of those expectations. I think it's really important that we can be honest with ourselves, that everybody at some point requires some help, and life comes with so much different challenges, with so many different hurdles, and actually sometimes, for the sake of not just your children but for the sake of yourself, being able to admit to yourself that you need that help is the first step. It really is, and it is probably the hardest one, because there's so many different emotions that come with that alone. um, but I can say myself, I've got two young children, and naturally being a social worker, having come into services, I've learned a lot, but it doesn't mean that I'm any, I somehow have this wand now that I'm being the best parent. I don't make mistakes and I don't need to still grow, and it's a learning, it's parenting, and being a parent and getting through with all the things we have to deal with in life is an ongoing learning thing, that there's no book that tells us how to do it perfectly. So I think, when it comes to our children, if we have to sit down and have that hard conversation with ourselves, it's the first step. And then to go out to your support systems, speak to those people that you trust, and let them know that you need a helping hand. And sometimes people can get that within their families, depending on what it is. But with substance use, that usually the family network is important. It's really important. Um, I mean, as you know yourself, with substance use in particular, one of the hardest things is actually sometimes you have to change your support network completely, because the support network you had may actually have some of the same problems. And actually, it's not that they don't love you and you don't love them, but actually at this time when you're trying to seek that support, you actually need to completely disengage from some of those support networks that you've known. And yeah, so I think for me, that would be my advice. And it was a bit long-winded way of saying, kind of be brave and just speak to your networks and be honest with yourself. Have those really honest, hard conversations that make you a little bit uncomfortable.
Do you know what? That is just first of all perfectly said. I think a lot of people there is that fear of admitting to themselves that they need support, and that is always a big, massive barrier that we as human beings, full stop, put on ourselves. And one of the other things that I just wanted to highlight there is, for if you are at home and you are struggling, whether it's physical health, whether it's mental health, whether you are self medicating, whatever it is, one of the things to also remember, I'm saying as a parent, is that your children will mirror the coping mechanisms that you use. So if they are watching you use illicit substances to manage your emotional well being or your physical well being, they are most likely going to adapt that behavior in the future. So, as a lot of the work, at least what I always like to encourage a lot of the parents that I work with to do is to break that cycle, to show them that, look, yeah, there is another way of us being actually able to do this. You can do this. I hate saying the right way, but you know what I mean. Like, there's a healthier. That's the better answer. Yeah, there is a healthier way of doing that, and yes, it does require a lot more work, but having your children watch you do that, it also empowers them to a recognize when there is something wrong with them and actually reach out for the right level of support. Because what I always say to parents is, when you look at yourself in the mirror, is that somebody that you're proud of? Because most likely that is the person that you're teaching your child to be. So it's okay. I'm gonna start going on a rant. I'm not gonna go on a rant. I'm not gonna go on a rant. But it's just very, yeah, yes.
So, okay, so when you said that, it made me think of something actually that I read earlier this week, and it was a therapist who has said that, we've always known that children's, I guess, the best outcomes for children are in kind of, ensuring those two-parent households, and we've had, there's a lot of research and evidence around that. But actually, what she highlighted was actually one of the most important factors from what she's read and from what she's looked into is ultimately mum's well-being and happiness, and actually the importance. So when you said that, it was like, yeah, it's really, really important, because ultimately when we aren't well, when we being, especially if we are the main caregivers, not saying that dads ain't or others, because we know that that can be the case, um, but when we are the main, if we're not well, if we are, full of anxiety, if we're full of, if we're depressed, if we have PTSD, or if we're, abusing substances, that there tends to, our ability and our capacity to be at our best as parents is reduced. It's reduced, and even if with that, all that good intent and all that good love, we just can't perform to our best ability. It just isn't possible. And those are the hard conversations. That's the conversations we need to be having, and in that, seeking that support, where we need to, if possible.
No, absolutely fantastic, honestly, Tara. And like I say, I've always said to people that if you cannot contain yourself, how can you teach your child to contain themselves? And also, like you just said as well, you have the best intentions. And this is what I always try to get people to understand, if we'll digress a little bit. But, nobody who misuses substance wants to misuse substance. A lot of them want to come off of it, but they just don't know how to. They don't know that there is another way. And sometimes they don't have that belief in themselves that it's something that they can do, because everybody does recognize it is hard. It is a hard process. Like you said, you have to, imagine people that you've known for 15 years and they have been your bread and butter in life. And all of a sudden it's like, no, you can't hang around them anymore because they are a trigger you will start using again. So it's starting your life all over again and picking up all the broken pieces while you are trying to repair yourself in the process. So I always ask people to just sympathize and just try to recognize that nobody at the age of 15 was like, oh, I can't wait to be an adult and misuse substances. No, but yeah, just
Nobody. And actually, it's really funny that you say that, because I was having a conversation not too long ago with someone who, at the time, I perceived to be a little bit judgmental to people who use substances. Um, and the question I asked them was, "Do you think anybody ever took substances thinking they were going to become addicted? Like, do you actually think that anybody did that with intent?" And they kind of thought about it for a moment, and there's like, well, no, but they know it's possible. And I said, but there's lots of things that are possible. We do a lot of things with possibilities. A lot of people do things they shouldn't, and there's always risk attached to it. Yeah, I said that's not, for a lot of people, that won't be enough to completely deter them. Nobody uses substances thinking they're going to develop a problem. Absolutely nobody. And I think they deserve that grace like everybody else.
No, exactly. And one of the things that I just really want to emphasize as well is that services do recognize this, and like Tara said earlier, we do work with people. We're not like, again, yes, removal will take place if you meet that threshold. But before you meet the threshold for removal, I don't think people realize that it's not that easy to meet the threshold for removal. Like, there are so many hoops that you have to jump through that when you finally get to that stage, it's because we could not do anything else, basically. And I think services recognize this, and they also want to work alongside parents to actually, again, like Tara mentioned, all we want to do is help. We want to help you. We want to help keep the family together, and we want to make sure that your children aren't experiencing abuse in the meantime. And I know that, again, a lot of it is unintentional abuse. We're talking about stuff like, let's say, mother has forgotten to change the baby's nappy because they were very high, or they were sleeping off a joint or something. Or you'll have cases where you would forget to give lunch, make lunch for your children, again because you were intoxicated. Like, these are little things that do tend to happen. And I mean, we've seen cases where mothers have made bottles for their children, and they never cooled the bottle down. They thought they did cool the bottle down, never cool, or didn't cool it down enough, and thought it was okay, and then gave their baby, and gave their baby burns. Like, you know, and the saddest part is I'm not naming extreme cases, I'm naming common cases. And again, in these incidences, we would sit down, you would have a joint care planning meeting, we would try to look at what level of support is needed, and we would try our best to get that support to you, meaning doing referrals to perinatal teams, or doing referrals to mental health services, or if you have a physical health condition, supporting you to engage with the GP, and maybe like putting you on the fast track of the waiting list. Because we are aware that your situation is a little bit more dire than somebody else because you've got dependents that can be at risk. There are so many things that are involved, and I just really want to emphasize this part because I feel like there's so many mothers or parents out there that would benefit from medical cannabis, rather than the illicit cannabis that they're using, but are too scared to come because they would have to tell us that they were using medical cannabis in the community, and are worried about how that's going to impact their family. Um, I mean, Tara, I'm sure you have much more to say on this than I do.
Yeah, no, I mean, to be honest with you, summed it up really, really well in terms of, we really do just want to support. We follow the evidence, and the evidence says, children's outcomes are the best within their families. We're not trying to rip families apart. We want to ensure that the right things are in place, because those unintentional things do happen, and they happen for an array of different reasons. And it's really important that we are just able to have those really transparent conversations, and there is absolutely no time that we're going to come in and be like, hey, we need to remove this child, unless there is a risk of immediate harm, and we've evidenced and that's so rare. That's very, very, very rare. And I think that's what people need to. I know they see the media and a lot of stuff, and it might raise some fear and anxiety around social services, but that isn't common in terms of us doing that. It is common that we get involved and we just put in plans to support. Like you said, there's processes that we follow, um, and there is plans that we put in place to try and support the family to um, just mitigate any risk that might be there, and be able to promote, well-being and quality of life as well.
So we're going to end it there. That's a good note to end it on. Um, no, no, no. I think that's a brilliant note to end it on. Tara, thank you so much for joining us here today. I think that, your level of insight and, offering people this sort of like explanation will go. What am I trying to say? Sorry, my brain is totally fried at this point. Basically, it will do wonders for people that are a little bit scared to come on to the medical cannabis sector because of the safeguarding concerns, and just to sort of like highlight that, if anything, they're doing the best thing that they possibly can for themselves and for their family. So I really appreciate you coming here to speak to everybody. Thank you everybody for joining us here today. We are going to be touching on patient experiences next week. Tara, thank you again for joining us.
No worries. Thanks for having me, Berta.
No worries done. Bye.